call them beauties, yeah, 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 yeah. They play that game their own way, 'cause they're beauties, yeah.
Welcome to Rubber Beauties, sponsored by our friends at betsafe.net. If you are listening to this for the first time as a fan of the Beauties podcast, check us out at the Rubber Boots Pod as well. It's not like Beauties. It's four guys having fun. There's Lester McLean. There's our boy Puff. And there's Stoff, who is also the producer of Beauties and the Rubber Boots Pod. This week on Beauties, you listen to Biz Nasty, one of my favorite stories in the book. When I sat down to write the book, two of the guys I knew I wanted in the book were Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette, not because just of their success on Spit and Chicklets, but I've known them both for a long time. They both came into the studio years before Spit and Chicklets to do analysis on the TSN panel, and just two of the great characters. And again, the reason I wrote this book is because of the characters in hockey, and Biz Nasty and Whitney are two of the great characters. And Biz has told countless stories on his own podcast, but I wanted to try to get a story that, you know, he'd never really told, which was the end of his career when he tore both of his ACLs. Now this is the first real overlap, because Stoff brilliantly weaved in a story that Biz Nasty told on the Rubber Boots Pod in season 1, Stoff?
Yes.
Or season 2?
No, sorry. That was actually season 3.
Times, right?
That was the first episode of season 3. Yeah.
Right. So Biz, that story about the Winnipeg hotel and saying, "F you, Fairmont," was from our podcast.
Yes.
And so that, I guess I do owe you guys royalties from the book then.
Well, the laughing, at least. You do hear some Puffy and Lester chuckling in the background.
I'm just guffawing the whole time.
I thought it was hilarious. That was a great story.
Your first appearance on Beauty. Congratulations, gentlemen. Although Lester's on every week with the theme song. What do you like about Biz Nasty and the story, Lester?
Listen, he's just, I mean, first of all, if you talk about somebody who is really taken advantage of our social media as it is today and just completely reinvented himself, I think that's that I appreciate that about him more than anything else. But he just he's just so, he goes for it. Like, you know what I mean? There's no angle with him. He is who he is. And he's honest, and he didn't want to go out any other way except trying to play on two bad knees. And I respect that highly. I mean, that's the heart of, if you talk about hockey players, that's the heart of a Canadian hockey player right there, you know? That's it's such a Biz story. And I'm trying to think what you say there. Like, he, in many ways, he is making a lot of money off who he is now, and he deserves it because he's got a great personality. I don't know if you guys saw any of the ads he did, the Watson Gloves ads or the McDonald's ads over the last couple of months, which are just hilarious because he's so self-deprecating. But I'm trying to think if there's been another player who's had such a non-career. That's an awful thing to say, Biz. He spent 12 years in pro hockey, but you know what I mean? Yeah. As a fourth liner, a scratch, he makes fun of himself more than anything else. Who's made more of himself after his career because of that, right? I mean, there's guys who've turned into great analysts who had, we have a bunch of them at TSN who had, 100%.
Average careers, but turned into great analysts afterwards. But, Jeff O'Neill scored 40 goals in the NHL. Noodles was a backup on a lot of really good teams. Mike Johnson was a good goal scorer in the NHL. Ferraro was great. So I don't know anybody that was played as little as Biz that has made more of himself.
The only guy I can think of in the history of and I'll say it. You can bleep it out, but Don Cherry, right? He was a career minor league guy.
But he coached in the NHL.
But he coached. That's true too. Yeah. That's true too.
Yeah. But you're right. He was most of the time in the American League
there for sure.
Yeah, he never played in the NHL, if I'm not mistaken.
Nick Kyprios made a good career out of being a scrapper for the most part, a long career as an analyst. But
is he not? Did he not play on the 94 team?
Yeah, he did win the Stanley Cup. You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah,
so he's got a Stanley Cup ring.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone that's been quite like Biz, but like I said, more power to him. And the fact that you talked about crying in there, like I can imagine that moment. There's mostly laughs with Biz, but when you do realize it is over, as he did when he was sitting in that dressing room. The trainer told him he's got 2 torn ACLs, and it's done. That's got to be I know Jimmy's career in flag football. When I broke my finger in the last season, I walked off that field, Puffy, knowing that I may never walk back because I needed my finger for golf. And I know how devastating that was for me.
Very similar stories.
Quite a similar story, don't you think?
Yeah.
You got me at the end, by the way, with the big moment, the Hollywood ending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I laughed out loud, and I live alone. So.
Yeah. Anyway, so check out Spittin' Chicklets. Those guys were kind enough to give me their time in the book and the podcast, so I will do the same for them. Not that they need the promos. And I will say this: the power of Spittin' Chicklets. I went on their podcast just before Christmas time to talk about the book, and usually. This is going to sound self-indulgent. I don't mean it to be, but I'm just more talking about their podcast. Usually, as soon as Christmas hits, book sales fall off the cliff. Like that little yodeler in The Price is Right. It's like, and you go from selling maybe 5,000 books a week to selling 12 books a week.
Ooh.
And I appeared on Spittin' Chicklets, I think December 23rd or 24th.
Yeah.
And the 3 weeks after Christmas, my book stayed on the bestseller list, and I attribute it only to Spittin' Chicklets and the people that listen to that podcast. So
awesome.
That's the power that those guys have. They're fantastic storytellers and really good dudes. So hope you enjoyed that edition of that stuff. You didn't say anything, but you put it together. Is there anything you wanted to add from your editing process?
I thought it was edited marvelously.
It really was.
The only thing I'd like to say on Biz is that his type of person and player is basically no longer going to exist in the NHL. And it's going to be interesting to see, like, guys like that were really important, like, for making things fun on the road, whether it's, doing something stupid or just keeping the guys loose. And a lot of, like, your teams are going to miss out not having those kind of guys, because a lot of the guys who played that sort of tough guy enforcer role tend to be incredibly good guys who everyone loves. And now just sort of having your regular nondescript fourth liners who just slightly not as good as the third liners at hockey, it's going to be interesting if that makes hockey less fun for guys just playing in the league.
That's so true.
I don't want to like outright disagree with you, Puff, but I think there's obviously still a need for a guy like that. It's just that the skill set of that player is going to change. Like Biz was exactly that, the fighter, and the great line he in the story that he was telling our pod. Coach comes up to him and says, "You're not playing like usual. Just keep the guys entertained to keep the room light and everything." There's still going to be guys like that, and then maybe it's the taxi squad guys now in the current NHL as we know it. But I think those guys still are going to have to exist. And listen, you might have to, case of a Leafs, maybe it's a Mitch Marner that's that guy that, who's not fighting but is bringing that energy. And you need that guy in the clubhouse. There's no doubt about it.
No, you're right. I think Poppy's right, though, that if you're just taking there's no room for – you're right. Like Lester, there'll be guys like that, but they have to have more skill to stick around.
Yeah, that's all.
A guy won't be able to – like, I think what Puffy's saying is Biz stuck around – basically just because of that.
Okay, yeah,
and you won't be able to stick around just because of that anymore. Like I think he's right. He said it in Beauties that he knows that he got a longer career just because the guys loved him so much. And if you go back to we did the Ryan Whitney episode earlier in the season, did we stop? Yeah. I don't believe we did a Rubber Beauty. Did we do a Rubber Beauty?
We didn't do a Rubber Beauties.
No, we did
that
not.
was during the laptop time. The laptop issue time. But Whitney, if you remember that episode of Beauties for our listeners, they flew out Bugsy Malone to basically, they were on a winning streak in Pittsburgh that year, 96-97, and 06-07. I always say 96-97. And Bugsy Malone, Ryan Malone, who was one of these guys, glue guys, was hurt. And the coaches, Michel Therrien and his assistant, said to the guys, "We will fly Bugsy out to LA for the rookie party if you guys win this game." And they were so pumped. It was like winning the Stanley Cup because they wanted Ryan Malone so bad to be at the rookie party.
Awesome.
And so that shows you, again, look, characters are never going to completely disappear in hockey, but I think there's not as many of them anymore. And the whole idea of hockey, certainly in the middle of a pandemic, everybody has to stay in their room. But even before the pandemic, more guys playing video games in their rooms. Guys do not go out to the bars the way they used to. And that element of the game, the whole reason it's going to be harder to write Beauties in 10 years because there's not as many of them anymore, right?
Yeah, the chapter will be when they won Fortnite.
Right, but I mean, to be fair, they weren't keeping Biz Nasty on there like he was a detriment of the team, but everyone loved them, and that's why
No, you have to.
I think to Lester's point, like you're gonna have guys who are now like the fourth liners there. You'll very likely have guys that are the same skill level, and the tiebreaker will be for them like who's better in the room, who's more liked. So I think you're still gonna have those character types, and they'll still have a bit of a place. They just won't be enforcers anymore.
Yeah,
and that's
for sure. But I think it's easier to play that role when it's so obvious.
When you don't have to perform at the actual sport.
Yeah, like when you're I'm not here. I'm here because I can fight and because I'm a good time. Well, rather than if you're like, hey, I'm as good as this guy. Like, I just think it leads to more competitiveness, and it's harder to be sort of.
Maybe the Leafs could use a position on their team like that, and they could hire Puffy.
I think I would be a tremendous.
You're just a designated non-player. Yeah.
Puffy, essentially, that's why you're on the pod. Right?
That's the role I fill in my life.
You don't have the skill or talent, but you're a glue guy. You keep us entertained.
You also have to go fight Ferraro after because you're our enforcer.
Puffy, you have all the skill. That's why.
Beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. You mentioned the tiebreaker being a guy who can entertain. I can remember a minor hockey coach. This is probably politically incorrect today, but a minor hockey coach telling me once, I said, what do you do if it's two players and you don't know what to do at Pee-wee, Bantam, whatever? And it's like, well, you take the one with the hotter mom. And that's probably been the way a lot
Tanya, does that mean before 2018?
Okay, well, hold on. Do you think Tanya, as the head coach of your son's team, has ever taken the kid with the hotter dad?
We have a very good-looking fathers group on our team.
Yeah, well, there you go. And you know how she's making her decisions, right?
Led by you, Puffy.
All our mutual friend, you'll have to bleep this, but told me years ago when he was still at TSN, when Gary Volk got traded from the Leafs, everybody was devastated because his wife was such a hot rocket. All reporters were like, "Oh,
bad trade." This has been Rubber Beauties, brought to you by betsafe.net. Another installment of Beauties coming your way, and another installment of Rubber Beauties coming your way next week. And don't forget to check out the Rubber Boots podcast if you haven't already. We have a lot of fun there. Thanks for listening.
Beauties, they call them beauties, They play that game their own way, 'cause they're beauties,
Are you wearing your rubber boots tonight?